going to read the first, and then I won't go through this item by item, but it says, school boards evaluate themselves to demonstrate that district leadership is committed to continuous learning at every level. To do this, districts must invest in professional development of every adult in the system, including the district's governing board. Sure. School boards evaluate themselves to create a culture of using feedback to get better. If districts need to be data-driven, so do boards. By conducting the self-evaluation, boards help create the culture that makes it safe to reflect on performance in order to improve it. School boards evaluate themselves to demonstrate accountability to the community that elected them. As an elected entity, the board has an obligation to report back to the community on how well the board is performing in its services to the students and the district that serves them. So we're rated, we had basically a green, which was an A for strength for all of our members. Blue meant a strength for a majority of members. Yellow is an area of growth for a majority of the members, and red was an area of growth for all members. So at this time, everyone has the document. And Sue, I don't know if you want to bring up the document so that our community can follow along a bit. I think that where I would find it most prudent to start for time is not to focus so much on the green, although to highlight the things that we do well, but the things that we do need to improve on. Does everyone agree with that? Okay. So on page 1, we have some areas of growth, and I will preface this by saying that this is not an individual self-reflection where we discuss what we think board members did wrong specifically, but as a whole, this is where we need to grow as a board. The first one that jumped out to me, that the board works well together. Not everyone felt that our board works well together. Does anyone have any comments on that for the board as a whole?
I'll speak on it.
Sure.
I think from when we started, 3 new board members, we started online. You know, I think it was well into the spring when we first met everyone in person, right? So I think this is one that I think naturally evolves and has evolved over time. I think even compared to when we completed this evaluation to now, we've had more of an opportunity to have thoughtful and in-depth conversations in recent board meetings than we had obviously over Zoom or whatever. So I think this one is also reflective of the time that we all started and connected. Those are my comments.
Thank you. I would agree with you. I think over time we start molding together better and learning how each other work and how to approach one another. So that I could see a difference tonight in closed session is where I noticed it the most for the first time. The next item that caught my attention was individual board members do not undermine board decisions. So I think for this, I would say that from the score, we need to focus on making sure that if we make a decision in this boardroom, we all stand behind it and stick to it, even if it doesn't. If I personally don't agree with something, I need to make sure that I would stand behind the board decision that was done. So I don't know if anyone wants to add comments here.
I think that's a really hard thing when you first become a board member. Is we all come into this with strong opinions and desires of things that we want to accomplish, and opinions and a voice and things that are important to us. And the time for that discussion is here, and we do that, and we're pretty open, and we all have our say. Once we leave this room, when we make a board decision, it's now the decision of the board, and we stand behind that as a group. So I think that's an area that we need to continue to evolve with, and just understand that the decisions we make here are the entire board is making a decision, and we all support that when we leave, because we've all had our say, and we've come to a vote, and that's where we land. So.
Yeah, I think we all come from different backgrounds and different experiences, and that's a big factor in how we approached when we first got on the board, just based on where we were from, how we were educated, what our educational experiences were. And I think part of the growth that we've had is that we now have a stronger feeling about each other, and we tend to listen more to each other rather than try to get our own way. I think in the beginning, we all tried to kind of express our own views, and now we try more to have a discussion and come to a conclusion, and then express our decision as a group rather than as individuals. And that's just part of the growth process.
I agree with you. It's really hard to come on the first year too, and really there's a handbook, but the handbook is so long and it's kind of vague and gray that we learn.
And it is easier to collaborate and create that unity as a board when we're in person. Absolutely. You know, I think we're at a big disadvantage having 3 new board members while we were still in virtual meetings. You can just see the difference in the last few meetings, when we are able to look each other in the face and have those conversations. It's much different, so.
Okay, board members follow board agreements regarding speaking for the board. I think we're getting there as a board. I think it's hard.
You went too far up. We're still there. We're under roles and responsibilities still.
I think I know it was tough for me to get around that. When we get a bunch of individual emails, it's hard not to respond back to them because they're coming in, and sometimes I think our protocol needs to be more upfront, maybe on the website when you're emailing and I've thought about when you're emailing a board member, you're going to get, if you email everyone, even individually, you're going to get one response back from one person, and it's not that the other board members aren't. And something that Sandy asked me to start doing is CCing all of you on every email that comes through so that you can see that it has been responded to. And that way the people who are emailing can see that you are also aware that my response has been sent out to you or whoever the board president is at the time.
I think that's important because I know that when you respond, she puts on there that it's on behalf of the governing board, but for us to see that response back so that we are confident that the individual has had a response, and the board president is the spokesperson, as we know, for the board because we have one message from the board because we make board decisions. So I think that's important, and so seeing those responses CC'd to us. I know last year when we had sort of email campaigns going on different topics where we would get like 100 on one, it was just like got bombarded with emails. At that point, I would send an email to the board that said, here's a sample of what I'm sending, but I'm not going to copy you back on every single thing because your box will just, be doubled then. So, but then just to CC the board back so that whoever wrote it sees that we've all seen the response. We've all seen the email. We're all aware of what their comments are because really it's about being heard and having that voice when we make decisions so that we understand where people are coming from when we're making those tough decisions, right? So anyway, that's an important piece, and I think that's a difficult one, but we have to. I think that agreement is really important that we let the board president be the spokesperson and respond.
Next, I have individual board members.
I'd just like to speak on that really quick. A couple things strike me in when we talk about this particular portion, and I can only assume, all I would be doing is assuming. We walk a really fine line, I think, as elected officials, right, between where we sit in the boardroom and how we interact with our constituents. And I fully understand the concept of not speaking for the board. I know myself personally, anytime I've released any sort of social media posts or emails directed at me or to the board where I particularly respond to that person, it is always of my opinion, never the board. I think that when you consider that over 6,000 people elected me into this spot, I kind of owe it to them in some respects to give them an answer, especially when there's a direct question asked of me. But I can also understand the concern of us not overstepping ourselves and speaking out, for the board. I think we need to be cognizant of that, but I think we need to be very cognizant of not shuttering the voices, 5 individual voices on this board that are interacting with the public on a pretty regular basis. So I just wanted to add that in.
And Mr. Leonard, I'm actually speaking to when we all get the same form email.
Right.
Not the ones that are specifically to you.
Right.
Mrs. Hinkson answers ones that are just specifically to her. I wouldn't answer those on your behalf. They're coming to you.
I think pretty often, though, we're receiving emails individually that we're each receiving.
Right,
We're each receiving the same
happen.
email.
And that's just so that we don't violate the Brown Act.
Right, and I understand that. I think that probably emails were probably, I know that there was something that I put out on social media back in March that was a big tipping point for a couple people, and so, I just wanted to speak to that, so.
Yeah, and really the protocol that we've established, I believe it's in our handbook that we've all signed, and so part of that too is like we review those protocols every year in January, right? And so we discuss them, we can make modifications to them, we try to base them on best practice from CSBA and from Ed Code, and on board policies. The 9,000s, which really spell out the board ethics, responsibilities, and things like that. So one of the things that we all signed and agreed to that, and if we want to have conversations about changing any of those things, we need to kind of investigate how they fit in with board policy and if that works. But certainly I respond to my own individual emails. If I'm unsure if it went to everybody, I will forward it to the board president and ask, have you received this? Or even send an email over saying, have you gotten an email from so-and-so? And if she said no, then I will respond to it. If she said yes, then I'll say, all right, please forward me your response when you have done that. So anyway, any other conversation on that one?
No, I was just going to say that I always acknowledge getting an email.
Yes.
Even if it's just say, thanks for reaching out to me. I will pass your concerns on to the appropriate department or personnel. I think it's really important, as Steve just said, that the constituents that voted for us know that we're going to at least respond, that we're not going to just take their emails and throw them away, and take the time to respond, even if we don't give them an answer to their question, because we can't, because it's not something that we decide. We have to at least acknowledge that we got them in, let them know that we hear what they say.
Absolutely, Mr. Schwartz, and I think we all do that. I think it's in our board protocol. That's totally fine to do. 100%. We all encourage that and do that when we're not the president too. Individual board members do not attempt to direct the superintendent. So I think we have a room for needs to improve here based on the scores we're kind of around in every category. Does anyone have any comments on that? Is it always on you? It's all the hard stuff, Mr. Skimowitz.
I'll jump in. I just think this one, I think it speaks to the role of a board member, and it kind of goes back to what Steve and Steve were saying in regards to speaking for the board or whatever. It is a fine line that we walk, right? We are certainly, and I think it got a little bit more confusing when the trustee areas happened, and now all of a sudden there's like this assigned group that we're supposed to, in theory, represent. However, we're a 5-member board that makes all decisions as a group, right? We can have our individual opinions, we certainly do. We express those, we have one-on-one conversations, right? This, as it relates to directing the superintendent, also goes back to the role of the board. The role of the board is to provide vision, to provide oversight, to support the goals of the district and that sort of thing, not to do the job. And I think we all come from different walks of life, different experience, as we already said, but I think there are certain things in this position that it's okay for us to go deferral. It's okay to defer to experts that do this job all day long. They are trained in this, experts, just like we have a safety coordinator with 27 years of experience. We just met, right? And now he's here. I'm not gonna go tell him about law enforcement. That's not my background. So I think what's important here is that we maintain our role in providing vision and doing what the board is supposed to do, but not attempting to do their job. And I think that's what that's speaking to. And I think there's been times where I would say there has been overstepping, right? Whether it's monopolizing time or going directions that maybe aren't necessary, right? That we need to focus on other things. But you guys were all looking at me and you wanted me to make a comment, so there you go.
I would agree with you on that. I think the school board's an interesting thing because we have, I look at myself sometimes and I think, here's a group of 5 people and we're overseeing and advising people who have their doctorates and they are professionals and experts in their field. So I would agree with you on that. I think when it comes to Dr. McClay's time, I was thinking about how much time, and when we get back to January, we probably need to set up some more protocols for this. I haven't actually asked her, but sometimes I wonder if we're all taking meetings with her every month, and there are multiple meetings, how many hours out of that month is she meeting with us individually on the same things that maybe we're all bringing to her separately? But that would be a discussion for another time.
Yeah, and I think the important piece here is that individual board members attempt to direct the superintendent. So the board as a total can give direction to the superintendent. Sure. Individually, we can have discussions, we can talk about concerns, we can talk about areas of interest, things that we have concerns about, but that's a little different than saying, I want you to do this, I expect this to be done. So, our role is not individually to direct the superintendent as a group. Certainly, though, to give feedback, have conversations. That's, for me, it's always, and I know a lot of you are doing that too, it's the monthly meetings. I pretty much keep a tablet nearby, and as things come up that pop in my head that I want to give some feedback or get some more information about, or a new concern, I'll keep some notes and save those for that time rather than trying to call her 20 times a week or something like that. I try to keep that to a minimum unless it's more something extraordinarily urgent, because everybody has a lot to do.
And I think it's a good time right now too, just to reiterate, we do not direct staff, even that also with Sue. We need to put all of our questions, if we have questions, we need to put it into an email to Jody or to Dr. McClay, and then she will direct staff from there, including Sue. I'm going to focus on a couple good things because this was and jump in if there's numbers that stick out to you here that you think are impressive, but number 19, board receives timely information. I feel like this is such an improvement over the years past. I'm so appreciative to the information that we're getting ahead of time so that we're not cramming all of the information in on Sunday nights or Mondays or Tuesday mornings. So I really want to thank staff because this year has been almost life-changing from the way that I'm able to operate for meetings.
Mm-hmm. I think the section above that too, that's board operations, but the board culture section is all blue and green as well. Can you scroll up a little bit, Sue? There we go.
Yeah, number 14 and 15, I feel like these should be absolutes because we're adults and we are in the field of education by proxy, and we should always be treating each other with respect. So that was nice to see that everyone feels that way. The other, number 23, board members follow agreements on how to bring up new ideas. I really was impressed by this. This is a new board, and the ideas that have been brought up and implemented, whether it be on the next agenda or in a board meeting, has been pretty phenomenal. Sitting on this board for 2 years prior, have never seen it worked as well as it has with this group. We know how to do it, and we've been able to effectively hire like a safety director that we were so excited to get. Number 24, Board members follow agreements on how concerns from the community will be handled. So this one is, we did well, and I think it's important to touch on it tonight. In the middle of a pandemic, I do feel like our board has done everything we've possibly can do within our reach, what we're legally allowed to do, and I think we've all followed that, and I'm appreciative for that, because at a time when we may not have all of the answers or be able to make all of the decisions, I certainly believe that we have asked as many possible questions as we could to get there, and if we've explored every opportunity. So I don't know if anyone else has any comments on that?
I think we've, when we talked about our priorities and goals for next year, we took into consideration the struggles that many parents and students and teachers and other staff have had because of COVID, and the amount of anxiety and just general disruption of lives that have happened because of that. And when we talked about adding extra social workers and extra counselors and trying to get back to normal as soon as possible, it's all out of concern for what we saw and what has happened. And I'm just going to express my own opinion because I know a lot of people have expressed theirs tonight. Believe me, we hear what you say, and we are with you. We would, if it was in my power to say no more masks, I would do it in 5 seconds, but it's not within our power or my power. But please understand that we are with you all the way. We only want the best for you, our families, our kids, and our staff.
Does anybody else have any further comments? Okay. On the page 3 of 5, number 29, definitely a red glaring note. I know that I filled this out after our midnight meeting. I'm guessing everyone else did too. Our board meetings have gone long. So with Dr. McClain and I have worked very hard to take stuff out of the board meeting, put more in consent, do more Friday updates so that our board meetings aren't so long, not only for us, but for our staff that have to get up the next morning and teach, or their administrators. So I would say this is a great time. If you have other ideas right now to shorten these board meetings, I would love to hear them. My only kind of comment would be we'd have to ask less questions.
Yeah, I mean, the only thought on that is I think when we all knew coming into this that there's a likelihood of having long meetings. That's just the nature of the beast, and this past year is no exception, and there was a lot to deal with. I think, I'm looking at Joe, but I think, not that you have to look back, but I think how the reports have evolved and become more efficient has certainly saved a ton of time, but has been very productive, I think. I also would say, because I was kind of thinking about this as well and kind of taking responsibility, I think also when there's new board members, there's a lot of questions, a lot of learning. It's feeling like as we get through summer, maybe we're heading a little bit over the hump of the learning curve, and I think that's a good thing. I don't know about restrictions on the length of questions or whatever, but I think everyone, if we're acknowledging it, I mean, we can all kind of self-reflect on how we could be a little bit, like this comment right now, how we could be a little bit more efficient, right, in talking about it.
Making your comment on efficiency? Yes. Mr. Lerner?
Yeah, no, just kind of dovetailing off what Mr. Skimwood said. You know, there's certain topics maybe we could break down into subcommittees even, where we bring in conversations that end up lasting sometimes 45 minutes to an hour. I would also say that as a new board member, of course, I have a lot of questions. We're thumbing through a lot of reports. That said, I take pride in reading all of that stuff. And while we were making this, I understand the history of where some of these topics may have come from. We're focusing on the here and now. So we tend to get bogged down in sort of the, maybe with each other on the history lessons of how all this stuff came about. Maybe more of a brief synopsis of that would be helpful. And I think maybe limiting our comments, I mean, we limit public comments to 3 minutes, and I'm just as guilty of sometimes droning on for 6 or 8 or 10 minutes sometimes. So anyway, that said, maybe we start thinking about implementing that into our decorum.
I would agree. When I look at the clock sometimes, I know we're getting late and our action items are our most imperative time to ask questions because these are the things that we're actually voting on and where we need to be able to ask the most questions, especially as a new board member. So I too don't love, I wake up at 4 a.m. for work every day. I don't love our midnight meetings, but they're important because it's your name that's going behind a vote decision that you make. Number 37 on page 4, the board adopts long-range priorities. I like that when we went over our priorities that we did this. I thought, Steve, you had some great input. Mr. Lohner had some great input on doing that 5-year plan of goals and kind of, reaching and expanding our boundaries a little bit. So that for me was an almost always. Does anyone have any questions on this page? Number 46, board is represented at district events. We didn't really have a lot of opportunities for that this year. So I think all of us attended graduations and school open days. But is there any questions or comments on page 4? And then page 5. Our yellow is the board uses cohesive messages to communicate district priorities, goals, and needs. Is there any commentary to this? This has been a pretty comfortable conversation so far.
I mean, I'll just say again, we have a certain obligation to speak to the people that voted us into office. I can only assume that I see this yellow because of some of the things that maybe I may have said or maybe one or two of the other board members have said in the past. So while I don't, apologize for those, I think it's important to understand that line that we walk, and I will continue to walk that line. And we can certainly talk about those things in the future.
Agree. We come into this because we're passionate about something. No matter what it is, and it's really hard to then go from individual to a collective group. So it's a work in progress, and I think we're always all going to walk that fine line and find our gray areas and falter and misstep, and it's okay that we make mistakes. Or if we expand those boundaries or we do something, we all learn from it and we have healthy discussions, and that's what's important to help us grow as a board and continue to evolve. So that is all I have on the board self-evaluation. Does anyone have any comments or suggestions or this would be a great time if there's something that needed to be brought up that we haven't been able to bring up because it wasn't agendized regarding to our board? Do we perhaps want to look towards a board workshop for the following upcoming year? Something a little different than what we did this year as a board bonding opportunity? Or do you think we are set to go into the next school year as the team we are and continue growing together?
I feel like in July, one of the things that we do is look at our planning calendar for next year, our governance calendar, and we set the topics for our study sessions and for our October workshop. And so that would be an ideal time to talk about what items of interest are out there that the board, the October workshop is board development workshop. So what areas do we have interest in getting further information on and having a board development workshop on? Or maybe more than one if there's a feeling that we need more. I mean, I think that's an ideal time to look at that.
And looking towards like team building?
Yeah, that could be one of them.
The only thing I would add is taking advantage of the new board members and the experience we had with onboarding and maybe being proactive about looking at that process, working through it a little bit so that at the next election, new board members come in, there's maybe a little bit more I mean, look, there, a lot of it you learn as you go, but there could be maybe a little bit more refined process of onboarding that we could spend a little bit of time and put our heads together on. I think that would be valuable.
Anybody else? Okay. I think that is it. We'll move on to our next information report, and that would be live streaming board meetings. And I believe Dr. McClay is going to start us off.
This is an easy start, President Broche. The board asked us to bring back this decision. If you will recall, I believe it was at the May 18th meeting where we decided, now that we were back in person, that we would no longer be live streaming. We went to a model where we are recording 3 sections of the meeting: the recognitions, the information items, and the action items, and then posting those. At the last meeting, we were able to do so shortly after the meeting concluded, so that people have the unedited piece of those 3 items. So the board asked to bring this discussion back and dialogue, so I will turn it back over to you.
Okay. So we will open this up to discussion now on how, I mean, I believe we all had an opinion here. So do you want to start, Mr. Lohner? Or Mr.
I'll
Skidmore?
just
Okay.
reiterate what I said the last time this topic came up, and I feel like until we're back full-time and quote-unquote normal, I feel like the interest level in the public is extremely high, and the cost to put on live streaming, let's say it extends through the end of this year, I think is reasonable. I also think that with technology and where we are with CTE programs and with where we are just in the world today, the live streaming option should be a normal thing. And when I say CTE, we have visual arts, and I've been in those classrooms at Temecula Valley High School, and I don't know if that's an extension of what those kids could participate in, but if there are cost-saving options that we have, you know, within our students or within our staff to make it so that we can kind of evolve and be a little bit more forward-thinking with technology, I think it's something we should revisit, and it should be something that, you know, if we're talking about access for our families, it should extend into not just board meetings. It should extend into back-to-school nights and different. The technology is set up that even in my work now, clients that I would see in person all the time are very comfortable being in Zoom and just talking that way. So I think it speaks to where we are today, but if there's a way that we could bridge the gap to get to a point where enough information is shared and the interest level, I think as we get back to some sort of normalcy, like I said, I think we will then buy the time to get us to a place where maybe we're using different means to get to that end of access and providing it in live time.
This was a strong desire of parents at a meeting, and I think this is something we can respond to immediately. And I think the community wants to be able to see the board meetings, and I believe we should do it. I don't think there's any question about giving the access to people who cannot be here to what goes on, so that they can be more actively involved in the process for their children.
Well, I got to be honest, I like what I'm hearing so far. And I guess just to kind of stamp that, what I'll say is, you know, prior to COVID and prior to all of this, did my kid make it to school? Did they get a hot lunch? Are their grades good? Check. Let's move on to the next thing. And then COVID happened. And now everyone is intimately involved with what's going on with their kids' day-to-day activities when it comes to school. I know we talked about the cost of this. But the reason that I suggested that we bring this back to the agenda is because I didn't feel like it got a fair conversation in regards to what that actual cost was compared to the benefits that we get from the community that feeds these schools. You know, I look at the role of the board, and the number one thing it says is setting the direction for the district through a process that involves the community, parents, guardians, students, and staff, and is focused on student learning and achievement. I can't think of a better way to involve the community than 2 Tuesdays a month when they can sit there in the comfort of their own home. They don't have to come out of their comfort zone, or they don't have to leave their kid's soccer game. They don't have to come sit on these hard seats for 6 hours. They can watch it from their couch And they can also get each one of our individual opinions. We almost knock out 2 birds with 1 stone here. We don't want board members necessarily going out and speaking to people individually on emails and social media rants or whatever they may be. But they get to see our own individual opinions, right, on display. And then they can go back and watch it on YouTube, and they can pick us apart if they want to. And I applaud that, right? Because the more that we have community engagement and involvement, the better our school district becomes. I tend to think that we're going to move the needle on a lot of the things that parents were talking up at that podium about tonight because of community engagement. So, you know, if I can even sway a couple of you to vote for this live streaming, to bring it back, I think the cost of it, the benefit that we get from the community and the people that are going to respond and the people that are going to start getting involved even more so once school gets back into session far outweighs the nominal cost that we assign to this. So that's all I got.
So Mrs. Hinkson, I'd love to hear from you, but we do have 3 to bring it back. Did you want to comment, or is it mute?
Just briefly, so my comment really piggybacks on what Adam was saying, or Mr. Schoonwitz, I'm sorry, and that's the technology piece. So when we were live streaming, we're live streaming off Zoom, right, which gives a different appearance than the recordings that we made at the last meeting, because I watched those back. Basically, I could see the 2 of you, and I could see a blurry screen. When we were live streaming on Zoom, we were able to see screen share what was up on the screen, see who was talking, that kind of thing. So I think that I'm not opposed to that. I just think that we need to do a better job on that. So however we accomplish that, I think that that's an important piece. And I think your suggestion maybe about interning some of our video media art students or whatever. And then the second thing was on the cost aspect. I think one of the largest cost items is what am I looking for? The closed captioning, correct? Mm-hmm. And so when we did the closed captioning, we were a rarity. Not very many districts were doing that. Most of them were just live streaming. And I understand the requirement for that, but I'm not sure that requirement still exists if we do have a live meeting that's available as well, you know, so if you can come in person. So could we maybe investigate that a little bit and see if that's a cost that we would need to incur, or if possibly we could, you know, now that there's 2 options, you can view it live on YouTube, or you can come in person, right? Or you can request an audio copy or whatever. Is that something that's a legal requirement that we would do that? Because I know that was, I don't remember the cost, but it's fairly expensive we're paying per hour and such for those individuals, more than 1 person, because they had to trade off, et cetera.
I think they would have to have 2.
Okay, I would just like to see if that would still be required, and see if we do live stream, if we can produce a little better product, a little more professional product.
Just my thoughts on that is, I would like to, if we would like to move forward with this, I'd like to bring it back in consent. So those costs, do you want them broken down beforehand, or do you want to do it, bring it back in consent for July so that we can?
Well, if you answer that question on closed captioning, that's the majority of the cost, right?
I mean, I believe, I thought we had to because it was an ADA requirement.
That's what she said. If it's live, if you have 2 options, it might not, or do you know, Dr. McLean?
We didn't have closed captioning when we had like this meeting right now, we don't have closed captioning.
Right. Because
So
it's different than
individuals would be able to come to this, right? And we're offering another option as a way to view it. So I'm not sure that requirement would still exist. I think it's at least something worth checking with legal and see where we would stand on that.
I guess my question is, is it going to matter? Even if it's $100,000, is this going to matter to us, or are we still going to want to live stream? Because I feel like we're still going to want to live stream.
Well, when we first talked about it, they presented several different cost options, right? So you're saying live streaming, but there were other versions of it where it was like YouTube, you could have a certain number of viewers before you have to have a paid subscription, or there were all these different variables, right? So, I mean, I think if you're asking, can it be going back on consent, I think, yes, it's, well, we should agree on it, right? It should be the most cost-effective efficient, highest quality version possible within reason. I don't know. So I don't know if you could put that in consent or in a Friday update, here's what we got.
I'd like to bring it back for action instead, so that we could have conversation on it, and at least discuss those aspects. And if we can investigate some other possibilities, I think there's like, isn't there like auto-translate on some of these now, I believe?
I don't believe that met the legal requirement last time, but I think you've posed a fine question of if we're offering in-person as well, can we get around that? So you tell us if you would like it back on action or consent, and we will put the financial information in a weekly recap.
My concern is that if we keep bringing this back,
it'll never happen.
it's like we're going to be in October and November.
Right. So can we make a motion whether we are going to continue with live streaming, and then we can figure out what the best
So that is my
mode
question. Do
is
you want
going to be?
it back in action or consent?
Can
We
we
don't
vote for
even
it right
have to
now?
bring it back. If you have an item that's an information report, we can take action on it right now if somebody makes a motion to take that action.
I make a motion to begin live streaming again.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lohner and seconded by Mr. Schwartz. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Okay, good. Excellent. Okay, we're going to move into our action items. These are long. Okay. Number 1, I call for a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 2020-21/42, authorizing a levy of special taxes within the Community Facilities District Number 1, French Valley Territory Transfer, Community Facilities District Number 89-1 Red Hawk, Community Facilities District Number 2000-1 Beezer, Community Facilities Number, number 2002-2 Red Hawk 2, Community Facilities District Number 2003-2 Stratfield Buey, Community Facilities District Number 2005-1 KB Homes, Community Facilities District Number 2004-1 Wolf Creek Improvement Area A and B, Community Facilities District Number 2010-1 portion of Quinta del Lago, Community Facilities District Number 2011-1 Rancho Bella Vista Improvement Area 4, Communities Facility District Number 2013-1 Rancho Bella Vista Improvement Area 3, Community Facilities District Number 2014-1 Morningstar Ranch, Community Facilities District Number 2005-1H French Valley Territory Transfer, Community Facilities District Number 2017-1 Cypress Ridge, and Community Facilities District Number 2018-1 annexable to the Temecula Valley Unified School District. Wow.
Move.
Moved by Mr. Skimowitz,
Second.
second by Mr. Lohner. Does anyone have any questions on this? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. No, I will not repeat that. Number 2, I call for a motion and a second to conduct a public hearing to adopt resolution number 2021-22/44, Education Protection Account, and discuss the receipt and proposed use of funding for the Education Protection Account for fiscal years 2020 through 21 and 2021 through 22.
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Skimowitz. Second by Mr. Schwartz. Any questions? Right. The motion's I just asked. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. This is the time and place designated for the public hearing for the adoption of resolution number 2020-21/44, Education Protection Account, and the receipt and use of funds for the Education Protection Account for fiscal years 2020 through 21 and 2021 through 22. I declare the hearing open at 7:25 p.m. Will we have staff discussion? Mrs. Lash?
Yes, thank you. So back in 2012, Proposition 30 was passed, and at that time, there was a threat to cut public education unless the voters approved Proposition 30, and it passed, thankfully. But all that did was it made us whole. School districts continued to get funded at the same level they were in the past, but those funds are put into a separate account called the Education Protection Account through that act. So after the voters passed it, the school districts did not get any more funds, and in fact, these funds come through in our LCFF calculator. So you run through that calculation based on your ADA and your unduplicated pupil percentage, it spits out a number of funding. Property taxes come in, education protection account funds come in, and the remainder is received through state aid. And so these are general fund, unrestricted dollars. We use them to pay for our teaching staff.
Thank you. Is there anyone present who wishes to comment on the adoption of resolution number 2020-21/44, Education Protection Account, and the receipt and use of funds for the Education Protection Account for fiscal years 2020 through 21 and 2021 through 22? A total of 30 minutes is provided so members of the public can address the board. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. There are no comments. If there are no more comments, I will declare the public hearing closed at 7:27 p.m. Number 3, I call for a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2020-21/44, Education Protection Account, and approve the receipt and use of Education Protection Account funds for fiscal years 2020 through 21 and 2021 through 22 as presented. Moved by Mr. Skimowitz.
Second.
Second by Mr. Lohner. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Number 4, I call for a motion and a second to approve the Temecula Valley Unified School District SELPA Annual Service Plan and Annual Budget Plan for the 2021 through 2022 school year as presented. Moved by Mr. Skimowitz.
Second?
Second by Mr. Schwartz. Does anyone have any questions? We had a report at the last meeting on this. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action item number 5, I call for a motion and a second to adopt the 2021/2022 Local Control and Accountability Plan. Moved by Mr. Skimowitz.
Second?
Second by Mr. Schwartz. Does anyone have any questions on this? Dr. Babas.
Okay, good evening. Mrs. Gross, President Gross, members of the board, and, oh, it's not on? Okay, members of the board and staff as well as guests tonight. We're here tonight to give you an overview, and if Sue, if you would go to the first slide, or let me see if I could do that. I can't hear you. You can't hear me, huh? Okay. So tonight, what we have to do is publicly report to you on the local indicators, and that's what this report is about. It is attached to the LCAP ultimately, and we'll give you a quick overview of this and report out our local indicators. There are 5 indicators in total. We'll do the overview. We'll give you our local assessment, if you will, of the 5 indicators, and then the connection to LCAP. We are looking at our state and local indicators on the dashboard is how they are actually reported out. So on the left side, you have the state indicators, which are officially gathered, and at the local level, we report our own in those 5 areas on the right, and we ultimately would like to see them as standards met. That's how they would be reported out publicly, and all of this is shown on the dashboard in different ways. So the first indicator is basics. It includes 3 different categories: teachers, instructional materials, and facilities, and it aligns with our goal number 1 to refine instruction, if you will. So you can see 3 different categories. We have to report the number of teachers and miss assignments and so forth. We have instructional materials, whether or not all students have access to the instructional materials, and whether or not our facilities meet the good repair standard, including any deficiencies, if you will. As we look at goal number 2, and we have standard met in that area, as we look at goal number 2 in terms of the implementation of state academic standards, we have a reflection tool that is newer, if you will, in this whole process, and it aligns with the metric for goal number 1 as we refine instruction. There are 4 areas in the reflection tool: providing professional learning, the instructional materials, the implementation of the standards, and the identification of programs to improve instruction. At the bottom, you'll see there's a range from exploration and research in terms of our journey in looking at the indicators to full implementation and sustainability. There are only 2 areas that we are partially meeting, and that it has to do with next generation science standards, NGSS, and history, social science. We are beginning development in both of those areas as we go through a pilot and as we work through an adoption process. We are full implementation, if you will, in terms of identifying professional needs of groups and identifying professional learning needs and providing support for teachers. We are full implementation as we look again at the self-reflection tool. As far as parent and family engagement, and we are looking that this is attached to goal 3 as we reach out to parents in the community. We have full implementation here, ranging from no implementation to full implementation and sustainability, and developing the capacity of staff. And you can see each one of those pink bars is part of the reflection tool that we are able to say we do have full implementation for building relationships. As far as building partnerships, we also marked it as full implementation, going with the range and looking at the 4 different indicators, if you will, that we had to consider to reach that mark. And then finally, seeking input for decision making. Again, we say full implementation as we're marking it publicly. The progress in building the capacity and supporting principals and staff to effectively engage with families, especially this year, and so forth. You can see the other indicators as well. For school climate, the reflection tool really is attached to goal number 2 is how we respond, and goal number 3, how we reach out. This climate survey is from a prior survey that was conducted because this past year we didn't do the robust survey that we normally would do, and we look forward to doing that in the fall. This is reported in, I believe it was the SARC report, but 79% responded favorably for student success, safety and connectedness, 90% of staff, 85% of parents, and 72% of the community. We have data, but we are looking forward to next year when we kind of rebase and begin to get more solid input from our community and our staff. Access to a broad course of study is a little bit more complicated. It has 4 different areas. We're looking at the selected measures of our graduation rate, our A through G completion, our enrollment in the AVID, advancement via individualized determination, our CTE programs, and our advanced placement courses. We have to consider what barriers are there preventing access to all students. And then we also have to think about the actions, the opportunity this coming year that we are increasing the number of sections a student might take in online courses, and continued expansion of both AVID and CTE programs. So we determine that all students have access to a broad course of study. They have access to enrollment in courses, and it varies by student group based on student choices and prerequisite skills. So next steps is we need a modified dashboard, which we will see. It's currently, they don't have all the data because we didn't administer everything like we normally would have or collected the kind of data that we need to do. It's currently in development by the California Department of Education, and the local indicators will be posted on this modified dashboard. We look forward to the coming year when we will have more robust data to provide and to look as we forecast in the future needs that we might have. So in a nutshell, those are the 5 indicators, and they will be reported out in the LCAP process along the way. Okay. Any questions? Thank you. You're welcome.
We have a motion on the floor. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Sandy, are you an aye? Motion carries 5-0. Action item number 6. I call for a motion and a second to adopt the LCAP federal addendum.
Move.
Moved by Mr. Skowitz.
Second.
Second by Mr. Lohner. Does anyone have any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. I call for a motion, number 7. I call for a motion and a second to approve the new textbook adoption for paperback forensic science fundamentals and investigations by Bertino and Bertino, publisher, Cengage, National Geographic, hardbound.
Move.
Moved by Mr. Skimowitz.
Second.
Second by Mr. Schwartz. Does anyone have any questions on this? Textbook, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action number 8. Call for a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 2020-21/45, authorizing contract pursuant to the multiple agreements through school project for utility rate reduction SPUR. Moved by Mr. Skimowitz.
Second?
Second by Mr. Schwartz. Does anyone have any questions on this? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action item number 9. I call for a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 2020-21/46, authorizing contracting pursuant to bid number FAC 2020-08, school furnishings, office furnishings, and accessories.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Skimowitz and second by Mr. Schwartz. Does anyone have any questions on this? This is pretty standard. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action item number 10. I call for a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 2020-21/47, authorizing contracting pursuant to bid number 19/20-01 FA Furniture and Equipment.
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Skimowitz.
Second.
Second by Mr. Lohner. Is there any questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action item number 11. I call for a motion and a second to adopt the proposed 2021/22 budget as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Schwartz. Second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lohner. Do we have a presentation? Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Action item number 12. I call for a motion and a second to approve the purchase of modules for STEM career exploration.
Move.
Moved by Mr. Skimowitz.
Second.
Second by Mr. Lohner. Does anyone have any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We don't have a negotiations update tonight.